Testing 1, 2. Okay. Good to go. Good to go. Yeah.
We need two more. Mark, are you almost ready? We're just, who's missing? Who do we know is coming? Hold on.
Well, Rich Huber is.
You only need four if somebody can test.
Mike Bordunski left a message.
Hello?
Bob Grant said, yeah, but I don't think he's feeling that good.
Hello?
What do you got? Welcome. You're here, you're on the call.
Oh, good, good.
Another person, we need one more.
What?
For a quorum.
All right, sorry I'm a few minutes late.
I was just bad mouthing you.
Why don't you power up?
Well, I just took the bus here, so I can report back on.
So, good evening, everyone. This is a committee meeting of Community Board 5. It's the Combined Public Transit and Transportation Services Committee meeting. This is where all the work gets done at committees. We're experimenting tonight because usually a committee meeting is in the office, small group, the members, some audience people come and visit with us. Tonight, we opened it up larger, and we're also podcasting it for the first time. So welcome anyone that's watching. The way we work, the committee and whatever transportation or service group presents to us or has questions or needs from us, we sit together and chat back and forth. Sometimes at the Transportation Committee, people come with traffic safety requests. So usually you just call them in or mail them in. Occasionally we invite those people to come to the committee and talk to us if we have any questions. So tonight, our big subject is the bus routes. It's good. It's massive. Believe me, it's massive. It's going to take a long time. And we're here, the committees are here to gather information and concerns. So what we're going to ask MTA to pass out some cards. If you have any concerns or recommendations, the people that are here, I'd ask you to fill it out on a card, and then the committee will collect it later, and we'll study them and get back to you or incorporate them in our studies, okay? So you can hand those cards out, please. As I said, it's a combined committee, public transportation and transit, public transit and transportation. You have a microphone, John, or you need one? Okay. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to the co-chairs of the Public Transit Services Committee, and you could watch us work. Thank you.
Hello. Hello, folks. Hello, folks from the MTA. I recognize a couple of faces. Some of you are new faces. We've been looking at this for a while. As you can see, I have a nice stack of your paper already. The plan is quite comprehensive. It's not necessarily, as you probably have heard in various meetings, it's not what everybody wants. It has a little bit of things that people like. It's got a few things that got a lot of people concerned. I think in our community, we've already heard that some of the residential lines are really problematic in their disappearance. I know personally a lot of my natural use of the bus routes in Queens are turning from a one-seat ride into a multi-seat ride. I think you've also heard some elements of being a little too train specific, getting buses just kind of staying on grid, getting people to trains, but that's not the way buses have historically been used in Queens. But in that, let's hear what you guys have to say about the plan. I do know that this is the first iteration, and correct me if I'm saying anything wrong here. The first iteration draft, there's going to be another draft, and we still don't have a definitive time for implementation. So that gives us both hope, and it gives us a feeling that you are literally listening to people and trying to take feedback to build a better plan. So with that, should we turn it over to the MTA to do their presentation?
Who's doing? There you go. Thank you. Wherever you want.
There's plenty of microphones.
Oh, there's the thing. Take that. Do whatever you want. This is all extra? Hold on a second. You guys want to see the maps? All right, so we'll hand some out to you. Thank you. You can take them home with you.
Just for clarification, this is the PowerPoint in print form, correct? So what we're going to see on the screen is also in these. So, and people, if you end up with one, please share, take them home. And there is hopefully a link in this presentation for feedback on web, and yep.
Absolutely. That link's on the last slide, just so in case you want to hear that right up front. Go ahead. So good evening, everyone. My name is Howie Levine. I'm from New York City Transit. Just coming around the table.
You're here for us.
I know, I'm just coming around the table. My name is Howie Levine. I'm from New York City Transit's Government Community Relations Department. Here to talk about the Queens Bus Network redesign tonight. Thank you so much for having us. It took a lot of my talking points. Just want to stress that this is a draft plan. This is our first look, our first stab at redesigning the bus network in Queens. There will be future iterations of this. But right now we're here purely to present to you what's in the plan and to get feedback. We really want as much feedback as possible. The more granular, the better. That's how we learn, what works, what people like, and also what people don't like in this plan, and that's what we're here tonight to get. So with that, I'll start the presentation. And I'm joined tonight by Eric and Dorian, members of our bus planning team, as well as Kate from Government Community Relations, and who is right there. So this process began in May with public outreach. We did open houses asking people what they liked, what they didn't like about bus routes in Queens. We had a number of those throughout the borough. There's a picture of one right up there. And we combined from what we heard there and a lot of data into the existing conditions report, which was released in September, which was kind of where we laid out exactly what we were seeing with the bus network in Queens, what was working, what wasn't working, and what we could use that document to build upon for the draft plan. And that was released in September. The draft plan was released in late December. Following that, we've been doing tons and tons, I believe we're at over 60 different meetings throughout the borough, looking into different public input, whether that's workshops or presentations like this one. We've been doing that now, we're doing that in the coming months. As the chair mentioned, there's no planned implementation date for these changes. Again, we're in a draft. There'll be a proposed final plan later. We don't have an exact date for when that will occur, but there's no implementation date. We're here to gather feedback as much as we can, and then so if everyone has a copy of the presentation, we can continue with that while this warms back up. So to conclude, no implementation date, gathering as much feedback as possible now. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Eric, who's going to take us through the rest of the slides.
What? Do you want me to say that? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No worries.
Like I said, we talk back and forth on this committee.
Absolutely. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Yeah. All right. Perfect. So.
That's what happens when you do these on Mardi Gras night.
So yeah, so like Howie said, my name's Eric Bird. I'm on the planning team for both the Queens Network redesign and also the Brooklyn redesign. We got both of those going on at the same time right now. So Howie gave a brief mention about all of our outreach that we've done so far, and really with the initial part of our outreach, the open houses that we held back previous of last year, we took in a lot of comments and everything like that. We wanted to really combine them into 4 key categories that we could try and tackle with the new network. One of those was reliable service. A big thing that we heard is that buses weren't showing up on time. They were running off schedule. They were, you couldn't really just show up and have it show up, or you couldn't show up to the bus stop and the bus is boom right there waiting for you. So we really wanted to try and tackle that, along with improving travel times. We heard from a lot of people that it takes them a really long time to get to their destination. The routes are very windy. It's trying to serve a lot of different purposes with one route. So we really tried to tackle that as well. Another thing was improved connections, not only within the borough, but to places outside the borough, like Brooklyn. We heard it's, why do I have to go through Manhattan to get from Queens to Brooklyn? We've been hearing that a lot. So that was one of the big things that we tried to tackle. And the last one was ease of use. You open up a map right now, it's very confusing. So what we tried to do is we really tried to simplify it as much as possible. That way, as we're moving forward, again, how I said, this is a process. This is just a stage in the process. So this is really introducing people to what this new network could look like, and really trying to walk people through that. So when we talk about sort of our core, I guess, strategies in terms of redesigning the network and how we achieve those 4 customer priorities that we laid out, the first one is making sure that our routes are as straight as possible. The more turns that a bus makes, the more opportunities it has to get stuck in congestion, get stuck in traffic, has to wait to make a left turn and things like that. That all cascades throughout the network, and it really makes our buses unreliable, and it slows down your trip as well. Another thing is figuring out the best location for bus stops. Now this is really sort of a balance, because a lot of people obviously rely on a stop that's right near to them, and that's great, but also the more stops that you have along a route, the more the bus is stopping, and it's going to be slowing down your trip. So we want to find the right balance between offering that accessibility that everyone's used to, but also speeding up trips where we can. So it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all distance standard that we're applying. It's making sure that makes sense for different parts of the route and different parts of the borough. Another thing is the enhanced connectivity that I was talking about, just making sure that we're providing direct access to important trip generators like colleges and universities. Really tried to make sure that we were beefing up frequency to key locations like that. And like I said, providing new connections to Brooklyn and Queens. Another thing is really focusing that frequency in the correct locations. This is the first time that we've done a real holistic look at the entire bus network. It's been a lot of piecemeal tweaks and things like that, and that's created a pretty disjointed network. So we're really trying to make sure that this is very cohesive, that everything sort of blends together. So what are we encountering, or what have we encountered in terms of redesigning the network, some of the challenges? The first thing is you look at a map like this and we see a bunch, it's a tangled mess. I think somebody referred to it as dumping a bowl of spaghetti on the ground, and that's essentially what the bus network looks like right now. Another limitation of the network right now is that most of the routes go to the same 3 places. They go to downtown Flushing, downtown Jamaica, and Long Island City, the Queens Plaza area. So we want to make sure that we're providing access not just to those 3 areas, because we know that people are trying to get to many different destinations throughout the borough. Another thing that I just touched on was the bus stops, making sure that they're the correct distance to provide the access and also speed up trips where possible. Another challenge is just the overall performance of our buses. We see overcrowded buses, bunch buses. We've seen our bus speeds decline, and that's due to a lot of different issues, but one of those is the overall design of the routes themselves. So with this new network, we're really hoping to hit those 4 customer priorities. And we realize that the network as is right now doesn't necessarily do a perfect job of that, but that's the point of a draft, is to get things started and gather the feedback and really take that as we move forward. So the first thing is simplifying that network and really providing that reliable service by having these routes that are as straight as possible, so they're not getting caught in traffic, they're not getting caught in congestion, they're just able to stay in a straight line and move as reliably as possible. And then another way to help speed up those trips, like I talked about, is the balanced bus stops, fewer turns, and also working with our folks at DOT to implement better bus priority throughout the borough as well. And then the better connections was another thing I touched on, and also the ease of use, creating that grid where possible so that you can see where those easy connections are. The way that our network is set up right now is not necessarily for a transfer-based system, so that's why you'll see right now you have to wait a little bit longer than you should for your bus to show up if you're taking another bus or something like that. So that's a part of this process, is making sure that not only the routes match, but also the schedules as well, and making sure that if we're having a more transfer-based system, that those connections are showing up on time. So it's a pretty seamless opportunity. So when we talk about a blank slate approach, and that's really what we've been taking with the network as we've been redesigning the network, is really building from scratch, using the public input that we've gathered so far, along with the existing data. Obviously, the data does not say the entire story. We need to get on the ground and hear from folks, and we've been doing that so far, and we'll be continuing that throughout the process. Most of the routes, we totally understand they look unfamiliar. They serve different areas differently, and I think it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just different. And I think it's a lot of this is education and making sure that we're presenting it the right way. That way, we're making informed decisions as we move forward, whether or not we're going to be tweaking a lot or less of this network that we have out right now. As I've been touching on, a big part of that is the public input. How I mentioned that we've had we will be having about 60 overall meetings, gathering that public input throughout this entire process. So we're really making sure that we're listening to what we need to be changing and making sure that's customer driven. A big portion of this project is working with DOT and figuring out those locations for bus priority. We want to make sure that in areas where we're focusing our frequency, that we're giving our buses the best chance to really move people as quickly as possible. So it's things like the red bus lanes, transit signal priority, which gives buses a head start at intersections. There's a lot of different items in the toolbox that we can use to help speed buses up. So when we talk about the draft plan overall, so just some things to touch on. The stop locations that you see, those are generalized stop locations. You'll just see an intersection. So at this stage of the process, we don't know whether or not it's going to be a near or a far side stop or anything like that. We're just at the stage where we're just proposing these very generalized locations. And as we move throughout the process, you'll be seeing more and more detail with those stop locations. The frequencies that you'll see as well, those are pretty conservative frequencies, again, just because of the stage of the project that we're at. We don't have fully finalized schedules or anything like that, so you're not really seeing the peak of the peak frequencies right now. These are very generalized over broad time windows. So as we release next iterations of the plan, you'll be seeing those will be a lot more fleshed out, a lot more detailed. And this graphic right here, it shows does fewer lines on a map mean less service? And that's not necessarily the case. If you have 4 routes that are running 30-minute, 20-minute frequencies or something like that, even though you're seeing a lot of lines, that's not necessarily a lot of service. If we can consolidate that service onto one line and work with DOT to identify bus priority improvements, we can really improve travel along a corridor with fewer actual lines while improving service. So here's a map of the zoomed in location that we're sort of in right now. These are a list of routes as well that are serving the area, and I'll be going over the route profiles as well later on in the presentation. You'll see the colors on here. The colors, they actually mean something now. So we have blue routes, which are sort of like current SBS routes where those stops are pretty far spaced apart. They're connecting key destinations, so that way people, these are built for those really long trips to get people to and from as quickly as possible so the bus isn't stopping as much in between. You also see red routes. Those are very frequent routes. Those are buses that are connecting, again, high demand areas, and those are showing up, every 6 or so minutes throughout the day to really provide that high frequency grid. Purple routes are sort of mini express routes where they'll make local stops along a certain part of a route, and then it'll go express, where it'll make 1 or 2 stops before it gets to a key destination like downtown Jamaica, Flushing, or a key subway station or anything like that. And then the green routes, those are sort of localized routes where they sort of fill in the gaps for all of these other routes that are straight and they're, the stops are a bit more spaced out. So, sorry. Yeah.
Why is the QT3 missing from here? Make sure it gets in there for if you're thinking about our area.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it should be there.
For sure. Yeah, definitely.
It's on the map.
It's on the map, but it's not on the list.
And that doesn't mean that we're ignoring or anything like that. Just, yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. So this map right here on the next slide, this shows sort of how our service has changed broadly. You'll see yellow means that's actually new locations that we're running service. Blue indicates areas that we've maintained service, that buses are still running along those corridors. And then gray shows routes that we moved off of that corridor to help straighten out routes and provide more direct connections. So the proposed local routes in this area that we heard that we wanted to touch on today were the Q11, Q18, Q21, 29, 38, 39, 47, 52 and 53 SBS, 55, 58, 59, and 67. So like I said, I'll be going over certain route profiles, and those are routes that have taken up that have not necessarily replaced overall, but have taken up portions of those routes. And this is a route conversion chart that we have online as well that shows the old routes, it shows the main streets that ran on, and then which of the new routes are running along that portion of the street for that route. This next map, this shows our proposed express bus improvements. So as you can see, there's actually not much that's changing. There's a few routings that are not necessarily the same as they are now, but that we're essentially serving the same area with these different routes. So yeah, I'll start and go through some of the route profiles that we have identified here. All of these are online. You'll be seeing these exact same things online. So right here, this is the QT4. So as you can see, we have the title of the route up there, and then we have previously the B57, Q18, and Q47. So that doesn't mean that it covers every single part of those 3 routes. It means that for the most part, it's picking up the main portions of those routes. So as you look online and you see that route conversion chart, take a look and see the new routes that are listed, and you can try and figure out what your new trip would look like in the new network. So this route is going from downtown Brooklyn up to Jackson Heights, the 74th Street station. This is one of those blue routes that, again, it doesn't have many stops in between, but it's really just geared towards getting people from Brooklyn to Queens as quickly as possible. This is the QT6. This was previously the Q58. This is running from Ridgewood Terminal to Flushing Main Street. Again, it's one of those blue routes that's really just about moving people quickly throughout these key corridors. This one right here is the QT10. This is going from LaGuardia Terminal A down to Rego Park, Queens Boulevard. This is one of those red routes that are very frequent. A little bit more, a few more stops in between than a blue route, but still it's about moving people as quickly as possible with these straight routes and with the added frequency as well. And that's taking up portions of the Q23 and the Q33. This is the updated QT52, so this is obviously taking over for the Q52 and the Q53 SPS. This is going from down the Rockaways, Beach 54th Street, up to Elmhurst Woodhaven Boulevard, up to Queens Center. So this is, again, one of those blue routes trying to get people quickly from the Rockaways up to a key destination up to Queens Center. This is the QT55. You'll see a few of these routes, they have the same number as a previous route. That's because not much of that has changed. This is one of those examples with the QT55, which is taking over for the Q55. So really the only difference with this is we're running from Ridgewood Terminal and then we're extending it over to Jamaica. This is the QT58. Obviously, it used to be the Q58. There's a few differences with this. It's essentially the same running from Myrtle Wyckoff along Corona up to 108th Street. And then we're having it run north on 108th up to Roosevelt and then extending into Flushing. That you'll see in the previous slide, I pointed out the QT6. So that's taking over for the southern portion, or excuse me, the easternmost portion of the old Q58. So you're still having that access. You're still having that connection to Flushing. And these routes are, since they have different colors, they're having different different uses for the route. This one is red, so, or excuse me, this one is green, I believe. So this one is a little bit more, a few more stops in between. The blue route has fewer stops, and it's just getting people from A to B as quickly as possible. This is the QT59. Again, this is previously the Q59. So this one is running from Rego Park, Queens Boulevard, out to Williamsburg Bridge. And this is one of those green routes, so you're seeing a few more stops in between to provide that access in between any of these red and blue routes that are leaving some gaps in the network that's covered up by some of these green routes. If I'm just cycling through some routes, it's because they don't necessarily pertain to this area, so just trying to make sure it's as tailored to this portion as possible. So the QT63, this is key because the southernmost portion of the QT63 is covering for the northern portion of the old Q53. So the old Q53 went all the way to Woodside. So the QT63 is extending it's coming from Astoria, or Long Island City, excuse me, down to Rego Park, Queens Boulevard. So you're connecting with the QT52 right there to still provide that access along that portion of the Q53 that we're not serving with that same route. This is the QT75. This is a bit of a zigzaggy route that's meant to really fill in gaps in the network that we're trying to make sure that we're providing as much access as possible. This is taking up portions of the Q32, Q39, and Q104. This route actually goes into Manhattan. We have it going down into Midtown on 42nd Street, and it's coming eastbound into Woodside along Northern Boulevard. This is the QT77 going from Long Island City to Elmhurst, and this is previously the Q38, Q39, and Q67. It's picking up portions of all of those routes. Another one of those green routes that's having more stops in between to provide that access. This is the QT78. If I'm going too fast, just let me know. This is the QT78. So this is going from Roosevelt Island down to Middle Village. This is picking up portions of the Q18 and Q66. Another one of those green routes that, again, is having more stops in between to provide that access. This is the QT80, which was previously the QT18, or excuse me, the Q18 and the Q39. So this is going from Astoria, 2nd Avenue and 2nd Street down to Ridgewood Terminal to provide access from Astoria to Ridgewood. This is the QT82, which is taking over for portions of the Q23 and the Q29. This is going from East Elmhurst down to Myrtle Avenue, 81st Street. You'll see it's coming down Penelope down there, down 80th. And again, this is another green route providing more stops in between. This is the QT83, so this is running along Woodhaven along with the QT52. So the QT52 is one of those blue routes which has fewer stops in between. This is a sort of a more coverage route that provides more stops in between for people that are trying to get along Woodhaven Boulevard. So that's running from down at Howard Beach up to Elmhurst. And this is the QT88. This is just taking over for the eastern and western portions of the Q11 and the Q21. And yeah, so that's another one of those green routes that's providing coverage in that area. So these are some of the express routes that are taking over for the current express routes. This is the QMT 100, this is taking over for a portion of the QM25. This is running along Elliott Avenue and then coming down or going into downtown. This is the QMT 101. This is, again, picking up for portions of the QM25. This is running along Myrtle, up to Fresh Pond, and then running along Metropolitan, and then down into downtown. This is the QMT 130, which is previously, sorry. Okay. This is taking over for portions of the QM34. So this is running along Elliott up to Woodhaven, and then it's running, providing the service along 3rd Avenue that the QM34 currently does. This is the QMT31 on the next slide. This is running along Myrtle up to Fresh Pond, up to Elliott, and then cutting across. It's not going over to Woodhaven. That portion is covered by the QMT 130. So this one's just cutting across, getting into Manhattan a little bit quicker than it normally does. And this is running along 3rd Avenue in Manhattan, just as the QM34 does. The next two are taking over for the QM24. This is the QMT 160. This is running along Elliott up to Woodhaven, and then instead of going to 3rd Avenue, this is going to 6th Avenue as the QM24 does right now. And then this is the QMT 161, which is doing the same thing as the QM24 over from Myrtle, up to Fresh Pond, over to Elliott, and then making that same quick cut over into Manhattan, and that's serving 6th Avenue as the QM24 does right now. So right now I'm going to talk to you about our website and sort of ways to provide feedback. So that's our website right there, new.mta.info/QueensBusRedesign. That's where we have everything that I've been talking about tonight. You'll see we have this link right there that allows you to review these route profiles that I've been showing. We have route profiles for every single one of the new routes. And we have this route conversion chart that I talked about previously that shows the current route in one column, the primary street that it ran on, and then the new route that picks up for that primary portion of that. We have our full plan on there in PDF form in case you want to read through all of that. That, again, it shows the route profiles. It shows a little bit more of the explanation of the process, and that's where you can find all of that. We also have interactive maps. We're using a website called Remix, which is really great. It shows we have a link for our local proposed bus network and also for our express proposed bus network. And with that, it's very interactive. You can click on and off each route. You can click and see the routing. You can click and see the proposed bus stops. And we also have generalized frequencies as well for certain time periods throughout the day. So that's a really great resource to figure out. And you can see, on the screen right there, you can see where your new route would be going. So this is a screenshot of what the website looks like. The main thing to point out is that up in this upper right-hand corner, we have add a comment. That's one of the many ways to provide feedback on this plan. So you'll see in this sort of box right here, these are all the new routes that are listed, and you can click on and off whichever one that you're trying to find more information about. This is showing like I said, the generalized frequencies that we have shown. These are for, like I said, very generalized time windows. So these are not necessarily showing necessarily what you'll see. This time window is 5:30 to 9. So that's not necessarily showing when a bus will be showing up at 7:30 or 8 in the peak at the peak, but showing a generalized frequency for that time window. That's just showing the same thing. Again, that box in the upper right-hand corner is always there to provide a comment for us. This is really great. So this is a feature called Jane, where you can drag from this bottom right-hand corner here. You can drag it to any location, and it will show the sort of how far you can go within 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and 60 minutes with the new network. So you can really see how we're expanding access with our new network. This is the box that you'll see once you click add a comment. As you can see, you can type all of your information right in there. You can provide your feedback and then send feedback. And we're taking all of that back. We're going through all of those comments, and we're trying to figure out what are the tweaks that we're going to need to be making as we move throughout the process. That's the message that you'll get once you've sent your feedback. I'm going to turn this back over to Howie now.
Thanks so much, Eric. So just lastly, we're just talking about resources for our riders. So we've been doing public workshops, which are different than the presentation we're giving here tonight, where we sit down, we talk through this presentation, and we give people, at a table an opportunity to sit with a bus planner and talk about what they want to see, what they like, what they don't like. We've been doing those. We were planning for 2 more of those in CB5. We were planning for one in Maspeth, and we're planning for one in Middle Village. We're just finalizing those now. But when those are finalized, the dates, the locations, everything like that will be on our website, which I'll put up on the screen again in a moment, but it was in the presentation a number of times. We've also been publicizing this plan at subway stations, doing on-street outreach, trying to get the word out about this plan at popular locations where people transfer to the subway as well. And then we're also been doing presentations like this at community boards and at civic associations. So lastly, this is just the timeline. So as I mentioned before, this is what's on our website. This is the proposed timeline. We're revisiting this now. We've received a lot of feedback, and we're very excited to get all that feedback and incorporate it into the next round of the plan. But because of that, we're re-looking at this timeline. So the key takeaway is that there's no implementation date. We'll be coming back to you with the proposed final plan at some point, and when we do, we'll be doing all the same outreach we've been doing like this to community boards and others as well. So again, just wanted, in the bottom corner here is the website, just again in case you need it. And with that, I will turn it back over to the committee.
John, question, John? So I had a question. You mentioned the near side, far side. I'm old, I've been on this committee for all these years, and the agencies, both DOT and MTA, over the years have insisted on one or the other. The one idea was that the bus, if it's a traffic signal at that corner, the bus should stop on the near side. If there's no signal, it should go to the far side. Is that still a policy? That's something we need to know, because if you're going to be shifting parking, especially that Ted's got his business improvement district, it could harm business. And the other question was, if they're running tandem buses on certain routes, if it's a near side stop, it's going to take up twice as many spaces as a far side, and we can't afford that in the shopping district. So these are the kind of questions we want to look into. My other point is, and John will probably, and Ted will get into it, is we have to take the people in the most efficient way to the courts. So the people in Ridgewood, Glendale, Maspeth, Middle Village, when they go to jury duty, they go to Long Island City, they go to Queens Boulevard, they go to Jamaica. And right now, most of those are 2 or 3 bus rides to get to them. We also have to get to the airports. It's not too bad going to LaGuardia or JFK right now, but if you're changing routes, that may screw things up. And then our parks. We are currently requesting that the B13 be extended to Highland Park, because we put in a lot of money into it, and it's a destination location. So those are the kind of things. Thank you.
If I could just piggyback on something that Vinny just mentioned, and something that we've tried to express already to the MTA is, and Eric, it's good to know that you're on both plans, because this area, especially our southern portion, and if you look at the proposed route now, it seems like nothing goes below Myrtle Avenue, even though our community board goes far below Myrtle Avenue. We rely on those B routes, and you've built in some stuff within and expanded on some stuff with some of these routes that run down to Williamsburg or into downtown Brooklyn. But we do need to have you come back with the Brooklyn plan as it moves forward to talk to us about how it's impacting not only our are members of our communities, but also the depots that we house, because we have 2 of them in this community board. And we're going to want to know, I mean, right now, we've already just gone through a bus improvement on Fresh Pond Road, which seems to be paying dividends, but it also highlighted to many people in the community how impacted we are by dead-headed buses that aren't necessarily even serving this community. So we need to kind of figure out how to fair share that equity kind of thing. I'd like to also emphasize the access to the Ridgewood Reservoir. It's not even on the MTA subway map, and it should be. It's a destination. It's a major bird flyover. The Audubon bird map doesn't even have it on there because you guys don't necessarily provide it as a known entity, and it's very much growing. It's a teaching environment now with the work that NYCH2O is doing. They're advocating for this. They've been at some of your workshops. We would like to build on that. We've been trying to get something to go there, and that might come out of the Brooklyn redesign. It might come out of this somehow, but we definitely want to see that. Speaking of Jamaica, I think there are some really good things, and I emphasized a few more of the hard things earlier that people are having problems with. The spacing of stops, great opportunity to speed buses up. We all have our favorite stop. We might lose that. I think we got to figure out how to live with some of that, because we know every time a bus pulls to the curb, it gets harder to pull out. It slows it down. The bus spacing in New York City is far too close compared to national and international standards, so that can help create better service. The split for the Q58 into a very fast line with very few stops and one that's a more local, serving various parts of the route and changed at certain points is a great idea. And we really, I personally like that. One thing that I think you are kind of missing with the grid is you're emphasizing a little too much, and I think you've heard it about the Q44, and you'll hear it from me about the Q54, Parsons Archer. It doesn't do us good if we're going going east or coming back from the east, moving west into our communities. You're missing the LIRR. I mean, you're taking us on Hillside past the LIRR, dropping us off in a way that's not a walkable connection. It's not a doable, I have to get on the subway for one ride back. That's an inconvenience, a slowdown. That terminal at Jamaica, not terminal, but that station at Jamaica needs to be more integrated. I think you've heard it on the Q44 because it currently serves that, but now it's been taken away in this proposal. So I just want to emphasize that too, because I think also the 55 going to Jamaica is a great thing, that extension, so we applaud you for that. I think I've been trying to throw into the mix, and I know some of our community members have reached out to the committee and indicated an interest in small circulators. And I know that would be a possible future thing to try to figure out, because it would be an infrastructural thing, because you'd have to get different buses. But right now, the changes of the Q38 and how it serves local communities in Middle Village, that's lost in a large degree, that a circulator might help, right, to kind of serve some of these inner residential areas and get people, because as soon as you'd make it harder for people to get to the bus, you're going to turn them either to Uber, Lyft, or their own car. And if we want to reduce congestion, we got to get people on shared transit. So anything that you can do with that is a positive. Ted, do you want to?
No, I think you covered.
Here's some of the feedback. Maybe you want to tell them we're going to look into it and get back to them? Or?
Yeah. Are we going to, though, these are things that we want to get to them,
Yes. So we should
but we need to have them too.
tell everybody we're going to look at what their questions
Yep.
and we'll
I'll look through them. Any other committee members have questions? Mr. Ferdunsky.
Good evening. I just want to say I understand all the work you're doing and that you want to speed up bus service and make it better and more reliable. But where I live, we have a big issue. 65th Place in J Avenue. It's called the Maspeth Plateau. Right now, we get two buses there, the Q18 and the Q67. The new Q67 will now be 17 to 18 blocks away. This is a big negative for us. Many people take the Q67 to Hunters Point for the 7 train, and many college and high school students also use it. And the Q18 goes to 61st Street in Woodside, where the express train is. Now the new Q18 will be all the way on 69th Street, and it'll go to the 69th Street station where you only can get the local train. So that's another negative area. It just seems like we're getting hit really hard, and it's going to be very difficult for many commuters and students. So I'd like you to look at the 65th Place area and maybe possibly have a bus go straight down 65th Place, or at least along the expressway, because we're left without buses for a big distance. And one reason some people bought their homes in that area is because, you know, buses were only a block away. You know, we wanted a decent commute to the city, and now we're getting messed up. So thank you for listening.
Of course, we'll take another look at that.
Okay. Anyone else?
You got it, Ken?
Hello, it's on? Yeah. It looks like the B13 is no longer going up Cypress Hill Street.
So, yeah. So the Brooklyn and the Queens timelines are
Yeah,
very,
I know.
they're skewed. They're not
It's
necessarily matching up. So we started.
Only because when they did work on Cypress Hill Street a few years back, you eliminated a bus stop on Cypress Hill Street at 80th Avenue, which is at the top of the hill for Liberty Park area. A lot of senior citizens, a lot of people with disabilities, with strollers, that's where they got off. My wife would get off there, and we would have a walk. You would either walk straight or walk down a little bit on a hill. Now you have to get off at the bottom of the hill. And we keep getting told, oh, well, no, that's the way it is, too bad. And the funniest part is that at Cypress Hill Street and 80th Avenue, going in the opposite direction, going north, there's a bus stop, but there's no sidewalk. And there's a divider in the wall on the road and a Jersey barrier. You can't cross it, which it doesn't make sense.
Also have to have access to those cemeteries.
There's a big wall.
Yeah, no, I'm
Is it
just
6
saying,
foot? No.
yeah, but I'm saying further up. Because
There is
they've already
another-
asked us to do cutovers in the
No, there
center
is
lane,
another
yeah.
stop.
Okay.
There's another stop further up for the access. I'm just had a question about this new QMT 101, which I think it was the QM 25 from Glendale to Lower Manhattan, downtown Manhattan.
Yeah. Yep.
It looks like it's going to be riding along Metropolitan Avenue.
Yeah. So that's how we have it right now. We're gonna have to take another
Yeah.
look at that, obviously. Yeah.
Because it used to
Yeah.
take the expressway.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
I mean, morning commute would be a nightmare.
Yep. Definitely.
I mean,
That's something to look at,
also,
yeah.
I mean, when you first started this whole thing, did the MTA take into consideration senior citizens getting short distances for shopping and doctors?
No, we're left out.
Anybody else over here?
I did just look through some of these questions. There's a couple of things that keep kind of coming up. Again, there was the QMT 100 and QMT 101. But there is a question as to whether just looking at the maps. I was actually looking at them, and maybe I'm going to step this back just a second before I address these. Your route plans, which are great, and you can look at them. I think people should know, if you haven't used it, there is a little thing called filters. One of the most handy things about the map is to use those filters. It's a way to toggle all of them, because the first time you look at either the local or the express, all the lines are on. And if you want to look at one, it's kind of hard to turn them all off. And there's a way to do that, it's called a filter. You drop it down, it's a little menu that you can say turn them all off, and then you can go turn on the ones you really want to look at, which I found helpful. But I also know that some of the way that the map is working, lines sit over top of each other, and it's not very easy to find them. Like, I was originally thinking we were getting 4 express, which I thought, hey, that's one more than we had. We have 3 express buses right now. That's great. To see your numbers, I'm like, where are they getting these other 2? And now I see them more clearly, but the route map doesn't let you get at the layers very easily, so I didn't even find 2 of them. But to go back to them, they start in some interesting places. Like right now, all 3 of our routes basically run the same network through our neighborhood. I think starting a lot of them at Elliott and Fresh Pond, I think that's where some of them go. It does miss all of Glendale, and that is an issue. I mean, there are more options, so I think I personally want to go back in and look and see what's coming where, so just to see that we haven't lost too much. But those routes that are going to certain places that are currently served, are they going to be served to get to the west side or get to the east side or get to downtown from the same place in a similar manner and similar time? And that takes me back to your Jane app. And I'm just wondering if there's enough time or enough energy or wherewithal to do a Jane for the current existing conditions. I mean, Google kind of does that, but not as visually. But like, if I can easily toggle Jane between now and the future, I can say, oh, you know what? You are doing a better job. If I toggle Jane between now and the future and it doesn't look as good to me for my usual route, I can then give you a little bit more feedback, right? But right now, all I can see what Jane might do in the future. So,
Yeah.
just a thought.
Yeah, we'll take that back. Thank you.
All right, so, John, what's our next step on this particular subject on the Queens bus routes? Oh, you wanted to do some
Yeah, I'm going to
All right,
do a
good.
couple. I have heard a couple times in different meetings, and I think it needs to be mentioned that there might be the 24/7 service. If there's local service that's 24/7, that's what should, I mean, if there's local service routes that match with an express route or like a limited stop route, the local service should be the 24/7, not the limited stop. Right, so you get more service across the borough. That's come up a few times in conversations I've had and heard. There is, somebody brought up no connection for the QT 77 to the Metropolitan Avenue station, which is an accessibility station for this area. Almost every one of our stations is not accessible except for Myrtle Wyckoff. And in that, anything that you can get to accessible stations, and I know you're hearing this on some other routes, I do believe the Q18 replacements don't necessarily go to an accessible service point on the 7, which they do now. So that's something to always keep in mind as you're getting us to trains, get us to trains that are usable for everybody and not just the able-bodied. I don't know if that's the correct way to say that.
We appreciate everyone helping us with this, and we really appreciate you guys listening and giving us more information as we ask for it. So the question is, John, what's the next step for the committee? Are we going to dole out routes to people to look at individually?
I think we should do that. I'm not sure how we want to work with getting these cards between
Well,
us.
I think you should
and-
look at the cards, and
I know, but I don't.
then we'll talk about how we're going to get back to the
Tell you what,
people that are-
I'll just take some pictures. I think that could work for us, and we'll get them, because I think this is information that the people here wanted to get to the
Yes,
MTA,
that's
so
what-
we
yeah.
want to get them.
And they wanted to hear
And
from the
we'll
people,
get some
too.
pictures of them tonight and hand them off to you.
Good.
But
Great.
yes, we need to start really putting together some kind of proposal of what we see as the benefits and what we see as the issues to address. I think we've verbalized them here, but it's always best to have it in writing and get it in. I would say that we can still, all of us, because the more they hear the pinch points, the more they'll be able to address the pinch points. So you guys saw how many times and opportunities you have to put in feedback. So every committee member, don't just, once you do feedback on the web, also send it into the community board and send it saying, get this to the Transportation Public Transit Committee.
Yeah, because you know my pet thing is, when are we going to see Brooklyn? Because if you take just the Q55, it touches 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Brooklyn routes and 4 subway routes. And we really have to pay attention to that. John likes the extension out to Jamaica. I occasionally use the 55. Off hours, it's very good, it's on time. Rush hour, it gets lost in the traffic. And if it's going to be extended out to Jamaica, you probably have to double the amount of buses on the route. So that needs to be looked at. Even if, as John said, you eliminate some of the stops, it still has to travel. It has to travel in traffic. Myrtle Avenue in Queens is a major truck route. And it dies at the Brooklyn border. We've been dealing with DOT on that. We have this major truck route, and all these tractor trailers go down. They get to Wyckoff Avenue, and there's no truck route. So you've got you got the buses, the tractor trailers on a major truck route, and regular commuters. So you really have to look at that, and that's what we're going to look at.
Just, Vinny, I just want to say the best way to reduce congestion is to get people on well-functioning buses and give them that alternative to do the service. And that gets fewer personal automobiles on the road, and that makes the buses move.
But I'm old, I need to drive. All right. Anything else on this subject? Gary?
So Mark Moss had a lot of comments with regard to, I don't know if you want to see some of them.
I think
Did we get
covered
them?
a few of them. I think the
Did-
really the detailed ones, we need to get into them as comments, and the
Yeah,
reports.
it's right here. Did we give you a list of, Laura, did we send them the list? Yeah, you know, the one you. Yeah. All right, well, we'll give them a heads up. In the meantime, John's going to go through it.
We've already kind of been discussing it within the committee, so.
Thank you.
Mr. G, do we need to distribute any of this information to the general board membership, or it's too soon?
I don't know. I mean, there was the borough board, sorry. The borough board presentation that Walter attended because you couldn't attend. He did report back at one of our meetings to the whole board about the undertaking. We can come back in the next board meeting. There'll be a report of this committee.
Well, do you want to hand out what we got tonight?
We could do that. I mean, if they have extras, we can always take extras.
That'd be great.
That's it.
Yeah, we do
You don't
have a
have to
few
carry them
extras.
home with you.
We were just going to offer
Thank you.
them.
Thank you. So you said there's no timeline yet, really, deadline.
There's no specific timeline right now.
So when do you want to hear from us, or how fast do we have to function?
I mean, I'd say always the sooner the better. I mean, our outreach right now is going to go through about the middle of April.
So soon.
There's a time.
And can you go to your last slide?
What?
Not the last
So just to
one.
be clear, when I say going through the middle of April, that's what we have scheduled right now, and we've
There,
been doing,
that,
oops, sorry.
there.
We've been doing all of our meetings, and they're going to go through the middle of April. It doesn't mean we're not going to take feedback after the middle of April, but I'm just letting you know that that's, you have at least, there's no specific timeline, but the sooner you can get us feedback, the better.
And this is the first draft of the plan. So they're going to come back again and go through, hopefully, another show like this and some more workshops to go with what they make adjustments to the plan. So this isn't the last time we'll see them. It's an opportunity now, and that April deadline is so that we can keep it moving. And is there a true implementation date? No. I mean, some of this is reliant on equipment. It's reliant on road improvements, possibly. So that isn't a fair question, though. Does the MTA, in your looking at this, have you seen this as possibly a phased, or is it going to have to be just kind of like overnight we're switching?
It's gonna, it will, it's gonna be more of the overnight type of thing, because it's operating as a network.
Yep.
You know, it's not something we can really change piece by piece, because then there's connections that will suddenly not be there. There's, you know, things like that that would make it very difficult to do that.
So if we saw something we really like and it solves a problem for us now, could we request that implementation? Or it has to be the whole package?
What do you mean, Vinny? Just, I mean, we want to hear
particular
what
route.
people like. We want to
Yeah,
really hear
so,
what you like.
I mean, just if, as I said, we're working, getting to Highland Park, for instance, we have requested an extension of the Beat 13 to serve Highland Park Reservoir. So if we have to wait for the full implementation, we'll never get that route to the reservoir.
Add a comment anytime, they'll take it. Add a comment, seriously.
I can't, you know I don't do that computer stuff, come on. I'm 80 years old, leave me alone.
So, you want to?
So, we have put in a request to extend the B13 to the entrance to the reservoir for Highland Park. So, are we going to have to wait for the whole Brooklyn plan to get implemented, or which could take 5 years? And we won't have any service to that park?
So I should say, this is the Queens team here today, but, so that's something that we can look at, but generally, any kind of major changes that are happening to the Brooklyn network would be part of the redesign.
So what you're saying, we won't be able to get that bus stop for 5 years?
If it's just a bus stop, that's, I thought you
Well,
were
it's an
saying a route.
extension of the route, yes.
I think that's something that has to be evaluated. Have you submitted that request already
Yes.
officially to, and did you get a response from MTA on that
I
request?
think there's been from NYC H2O and from, with our blessing, we have asked for the MTA to, or New York City Transit to look at a couple of different routes and possibilities. We have never gotten back a real positive, like, oh, that's great. It's just been more like, we can't do that at this time, or we're not even thinking about it at this time. So we're gonna, like Vinny, I have been actively trying to do something for years. We will keep like just poking you.
I was just gonna say,
during
keep-
this
yeah.
plan, we're gonna keep poking you.
Yeah, keep pursuing
that.
it, but I think Brooklyn Redesign is an opportunity to really revisit that.
I'm Gary Giordano. I'm the district manager of the community board. And some of the criticisms that I've heard from people in the neighborhood, to reiterate what Mike Fordunsky said, what's being proposed for the Q18 and the Q67 would take bus service away from a lot of people in Maspeth. And Maspeth doesn't have a lot of bus service to speak of to begin with. Taking away the Q38, going toward the M train station, that whole loop there is a very unpopular proposal. And then I think it's the 29 would no longer go to Queens Center Mall, and I think a lot of people are upset with the 47 and how it wouldn't connect with some of the schools that the kids in our neighborhood go to now. I mean, there are others, but those are the main ones that come to mind from me and who's been speaking to me about their dissatisfaction.
And to kind of piggyback on that last statement and something that was in your slide, you mentioned colleges and universities, but we also need schools, local schools. And that's some of the
Absolutely.
stuff that we've lost in, I'd say, Middle Village and Maspeth, is connectors to Martin Luther, to Christ the King in certain cases, and to some of the more local schools within the Middle Village area near 80th, not far from. Yeah. Forest Hills is still got the connection.
Sorry about that. Okay. So anything more on Queens bus routes? If not, how many traffic safety requests do we have?
So can I just thank the committee for having us so much tonight, and just
Thank you. If you want to go.
Yep. And Gary, just one more thing. Just as you're speaking to people, if you can, refer them to the website where they can give feedback, that would be great. We want to get as much feedback as possible, as I said already, and just, if they can submit it themselves, that's great.
So on the paperwork we shared with our guests tonight, there's contact information in there? Okay,
Yeah, the
All right.
website's on that.
thank you. Okay, so before we get into traffic safety requests, there is you people are having a bus network redesign workshop on March 9th. So there's a workshop on March 9th, 6:30 p.m. at PS 153 in Maspeth. And that's being co-sponsored by Councilmember Holden and the MTA. Thank you.
We're also working to add one in Middle Village, and we'll let the board know as soon as that's confirmed.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. So, what do you have there?
This could have been much hotter than it is, to the point where I asked for the police department to have some presence here. Because I heard about what happened by 49, you know what I mean? But this was hours.
Okay, so we'll go on to the next phase of business, traffic safety request. Okay. 2020 committee, 2020 Cost Service is requesting a letter of no objection. We've asked them for further information, which we haven't got. Anybody know anything about 2020 Cost Service?
Their vision isn't very good. I don't, do we normally do a letter of no objection? No.
We've done, 2020 is located at 6520 Cooper Avenue, is where they're going to store their cars. That's that gas station on the, I guess, northeast corner of Cypress and Hill Street and Cooper. They want a letter of no, they need to have, to get their license completed with the city, they need to have a place where they store their cars. There's 2 gas stations and a supermarket or something like that. Oh, there's a storefront there, yeah. They have, let's see, 10 vehicles. 10 vehicles. 6520 is the gas station, is the store. When you look up that property, 6520 is the store. Their office, their cost service is at 6614 Myrtle Avenue. That's their radio transmitter in that. Do you know who owns that gas station?
Nobody that likes the community, how's that?
Well, is it like a black car service?
Yeah, it would be like Liberty or 4-1s or any of those. It's
Uber.
not, no, it's not Uber.
Not an Uber?
No, it's not. It's a black car service. I mean, they could run some of them, yeah, but
Which will just be, you can increase street parking spots being taken up because there's no obligation for bases to have off-street parking for Ubers if they end up going that route as well.
To get their taxi limousine certification, they need to have a location.
For the black car service, but if they end up licensing out for Ubers, there's no obligation for off-street for those. So if they end up going that route.
No, they're looking to get their TLC license. So since they haven't responded to us, we have no position on that. We're taking no position. Okay? I'm sorry? It's 2 different gas stations in the same one. There's This is, yeah, John, because I can't read backwards, I'm sorry.
You got a copy of that, right, Jerry? I don't. You don't? Yeah, I got a mic. That's one, right?
The second one, we're up to the second one. Number two.
That's one. This is two. I have two. He did that one already.
No, that's what we're going to do now. Right?
Yes, this is Dorothy Collins. Did you, yeah. So they are asking for a traffic light on Flushing Avenue at the corner of 54th Street. Several times as I was making a left turn from 54th Street onto Flushing, cars thinking the left turn signal is for them to proceed, while their signal is red. Right behind that red signal is the green arrow to turn left across Flushing Avenue. I was almost hit tonight as I was returning to my office on Flushing Avenue. Last week, a woman with her toddler were crossing the street. I was waiting for them to cross. A car was in the left turn area on Flushing, but a car speeding down Flushing Avenue bypassed the car waiting and almost hit the mother and her child. There must be an extra sign out up letting cars on Flushing Avenue know.
Anybody familiar with this location?
No. Who, do you want to check on that, Mike? I can check. Could you, so 54th and Flushing, looking for a traffic light. It's more of a signage and.
It's more of an issue of the configuration of the signals. Well, we're not on tape. The configuration of the signals and the timing of the signals.
And the signage for drivers so they don't mistake the signal.
No right turn on red, yeah. Okay.
They're actually saying there should be an extra sign out letting cars on Flushing Avenue know they have the steady red. They cannot turn until 54th Street traffic has a red light, red signal. Do we have these, Laura? Hello. You usually send these to me. I probably got them. If I
Yeah, that one might not have gone out. We got that through the admin. And I know Kathy was in touch with the woman trying to get a little bit more information. But
yeah,
they
the
had-
grammar here is not that great.
Pretty bad.
But it might be helpful if we could send it to Mike, if he's going to look at it, just so he has the words that they're using, even though they're not the clearest.
Yeah, I'll see if
Okay,
Kathy,
all
I
right,
asked
so-
her today. I don't think the woman had connected again on it.
So Mike will
Okay.
look into that and get
Thanks.
back to us at the next meeting.
Thank you, Mike.
So this is from our transportation chair, Mr. Arcuri. It's simply saying city bench installation along Fresh Pond Road. He's saying a location at 6410 on Fresh Pond Road is no good because it is front of Catania Bakery, and that is their loading unloading zone. That's also, I think, where they moved at bus stop, though.
Yeah.
So the loading zone happens off hours. I would say that the bus stop is big enough that they could figure out a place to put it, because Catania's kind of in the middle there. They could put a bench in front of other stores because there's there's other things there that it could go in front
Yeah.
of.
No, they gave that specific address, so.
Okay. So they gave two addresses, actually, 6410 and 6417.
Right. that's-
So it's across the street where the new stop is and in front of the other stop. Maybe instead of saying 6410 is bad, we should give them an address that
All right,
is
we'll
good.
take a look and then we'll follow up.
So that's number 3, Mr. Giordano.
John will follow up.
Um,
Alternate location.
Request to address traffic safety concerns in Ridgewood, Queens. John O'Neill, this is more of an informational thing. This isn't really so much a traffic. This is just the status of Ari Richter, who's been an ongoing machine here, because he just got another two stop signs, one over near you, I believe, the one that you might have been wanting for a little while. It's just telling us where the status is of some of these and what's been approved and denied. This is a little bit, I feel like I've seen this more recently the 20th of February, but I guess I haven't. Yeah, Green and Onderdonk just got it. It's including the old message that I saw from January, but it's just saying that Green and Onderdonk has been qualified to get an all-way stop. So that's just an informational. Other matters to discuss. So future MTA bus redesign workshops, you mentioned the one on the 9th, right? And there's going to be one at PS 49 in April. Mark Moss provided a list of questions, concerns regarding bus redesign. We're going to incorporate that into our feedback. And there's been some back and forth on some of those issues, and people do agree with them and want to see them included. Other people on the committee should have gotten that message. I think it was shared widely. It's not been announced as to date yet in April. The only one that's got a firm date is the one at PS 153, Monday, March 9th, between 6:30 and 8. Queens Traffic Safety Board meeting notice. The next meeting of the Queens Traffic Safety Board will be held on Thursday, March 5th, 2020 at 9:30 a.m. in Queensborough Hall. So if you have any interest in traffic safety, you got to take the day off, or you hopefully operate that you can get that for work or something. And it's going to be, it looks like they're going to focus a little bit on pedestrian and bicycle deaths, which were declining and are now rising again. Hope you recognize. In light of this, Vinny, if you can just talk a little bit about the way the American automobile seems to be growing like the average girth of the American body.
Unbelievable. When I went to the auto show this year, I never saw vehicles that big in my life.
And right now, any day, any hour you walk on Forest Avenue, you now have cars that are fully up on the sidewalk. They're compacting the tree pits, so that's not going to be healthy for the trees. They're hitting the trees. It's just not going to be healthy for the sidewalks because the sidewalks aren't designed for cars. They're designed for people. And that's one of the largest. There's an amazing article that the Detroit Free Press put out last year, a very comprehensive one about traffic safety and talking about the design structure of cars and the height. And they now, instead of the sedan, which would clip you in the legs, you have SUVs that actually hit you at chest height or higher. And that's one of the real big problems right now.
The other thing with the Traffic Safety Council, in conjunction with the Governor's Traffic Safety Council and St. Mary's Hospital, is it St. Mary's? I'm sorry. Queens Traffic Safety Council, in conjunction with the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee, and I think it's St. Mary's Hospital, gives out baby seats for people that qualify with income, or will install yours properly, because most people don't install their baby seats properly.
Yep. We've been notified that the final design of complex pedestrian ramp upgrades has been moved forward. When I first saw this, Vinny, I thought it was your favorite project because it starts with an HWP, but it's not. No. There are only one of these are going to be hitting our board, and it's down in your area, Ted.
Cypress Avenue, right?
Yeah. There's, well, it's one dot, so I guess maybe that's two spots.
The northeast and the south, there's two intersections.
QN5. Nope, that's MN5. QN. There it is. Yeah, Center Street and Cypress Avenue. Okay. And that's it.
So did we get any feedback, Mr. G, on my rant about the Wyckoff Avenue reconstruction project, HWK?
Oh, yeah, so that brings up something. Julio Salazar from Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez's office called me and said that he would work to get DDC at one of our meetings, Department of Design and Construction, to talk to us about the Wyckoff Avenue plan. So that becomes the question of when the next Transportation Committee meeting would be. So, right, so Vinny is suggesting the 31st.
If we can get them and start to get that moving forward, and that's the federal money that's going to be needed, I'd be glad to switch our usual, or push our, because that's the 5th.
Yeah, because the 24th is special election. You're not going to get any agency people out that day. And
So let's do the
31st.
Is everybody amenable to the 31st next month?
March 31st.
Or at least our usual attendees and not just those between the video this time.
Any other items to come before the Transportation or Public Transit Committee? No? If not, we'll thank everybody for participating. Thanks, Donald, for the electronics and making things work. And Mark, you get any feedback on who was watching today? I'm sorry? Oh, good, good. So that's a question for the whole board at some point. Should we, and we'll talk about it at the board meeting, should we occasionally podcast committee meetings?
I would
John?
I would say land use should definitely be
Yeah.
more consistently
All right,
done.
We'll talk it in the executive committee, we'll talk about it, and we'll check with the money. Yes, Rich?
Regarding podcasting it, lately the press has not been showing up as frequently to our committee meetings, so perhaps maybe give people an opportunity with a podcast from time to time.
All right, well, Mark, are you going to you think you're going to get written or verbal comments? No, you never do, huh? Okay. Well, ask around if anybody, is interested in more committee meetings, if we have enough money. All right, motion to adjourn? Okay, second? Thank you, all in favor? Aye.